underground bases with stories of firefights with non-human beings, a military facility rumored to keep alien bodies in cold storage, and government facilities testing the boundaries of the human mind, experimental weapons, poisons. These are disturbing things caught inside restricted facilities. In 1989, Bob Lazar went public saying he'd been hired to work at S4, a secret facility built into the side of the mountains near Area 51. Not a simple hangar hidden in the desert, but a base carved into the rock, with hangar doors flush against the mountain ridgeline. According to Lazar, there were 9 disc-shaped flying saucers in these hangars. The one he nicknamed the Sport Model. He claimed their hulls were made of a strange alloy that looked like, in his words, liquid titanium. He says his job was to reverse engineer the propulsion system of one of these craft, and he also described watching a test flight firsthand. Lazar also claimed he was shown photos of an alien autopsy. He said he wasn't given much detail about them though. He didn't know when they were taken or anything like that, but they were black and white photos of an alien-looking creature on an autopsy table. And security at the facility was very intense. Entry supposedly required biometric hand scanners that measured bone structure. On one occasion, he says even going to the bathroom and being escorted by guards. He later went public claiming the government tried to discredit him, wiping his academic records, threatening him if he spoke out. The legend of Dulce Base goes back to the late 70s and early 80s, when a man named Paul Benowitz claimed he intercepted strange signals, electronic communications from, according to him, alien origins. Paul Benowitz started out as a regular businessman in Albuquerque who happened to be obsessed with UFOs. In the early 80s, he lived close enough to Kirtland Air Force Base that he could see weird lights over the area at night. And he had equipment that picked up strange electronic signals he couldn't explain. He convinced himself these weren't just military tests. He thought he was watching actual alien craft, and that whatever was happening at Kirtland was connected to the conspiracies people already talked about at places like Area 51. Benowitz didn't keep any of this to himself. He wrote letters, recorded tapes, and passed everything to the Air Force, the DIA, anyone who would listen. Instead of ignoring him, the Air Force Office of Special Investigations ended up using him. A UFO researcher named Bill Moore later admitted he was basically recruited into feeding Benowitz false inside info. He told him stories about underground alien bases, crashed saucers, hostile beings, not to help him, but to keep him distracted from real classified military projects he had accidentally gotten too close to. As the story goes, anyway. Benowitz swallowed every bit of it though. He stopped sleeping, he wasn't thinking straight, and eventually he spiraled into full paranoia. His family had him hospitalized for a month because he was convinced aliens were after him and that the government was watching his house. He lived the rest of his life in that kind of state, finally dying in 2003. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, known to UFO buffs as Wright-Pat, is a real historic U.S. air base outside Dayton, Ohio. After the 1947 Roswell incident, a bunch of wild rumors started floating around that the crash debris and maybe even alien bodies were shipped to Wright-Pat. The core of the legend centers on one area, Hangar 18. Hangar 18 lore really started churning up in 1974 when a UFO conspiracy writer named Robert Spencer Carr claimed a, quote, high-ranking military source told him that inside Hangar 18, they had not one, but 2 flying saucers from a crash in New Mexico, plus the bodies of around a dozen small humanoids under autopsy. People have named eyewitnesses over the years. One is a pilot said to be Oliver Henderson, who allegedly flew one of the debris-loaded planes from the crash site to Wright-Pat. Another is claimed to be Old War Hawk pilot Marion Magruder. His children reportedly say he told them he once saw a living alien at Wright Field in 1947. He allegedly said the military later destroyed the creature after testing. On top of that, some versions of the legend claim the stuff wasn't just stored in a hangar. There are stories about an underground cold storage facility where bodies were secretly shipped, possibly after being autopsied. Of course, the official word from the US Air Force has been that there was never any Hangar 18 storing alien craft or bodies. Obviously, that's what they're gonna say, right? When most people think Los Alamos, they picture the birth of nuclear bombs, but depending who you ask, Los Alamos may have played a darker, stranger role. acting as a bridge between human top-secret labs and advanced alien technology. One name often tied in is again Bob Lazar. Some versions of the story say that before Lazar supposedly went to the secret facility near Area 51, he had background or clearance tied to Los Alamos, which supposedly helped him get recruited for reverse engineering of alien craft. Story goes, the program he joined studied strange technology recovered from crashed UFOs. Among the strangest materials sometimes mentioned is a mysterious element called Element 115. Scientists first created Element 115 in 2003 at the Joint Institute for Nuclear Research in Russia, and I do mean created. It wasn't discovered in nature. They made it by smashing atoms together. When they finally pulled it off, they got a super heavy radioactive element that existed for a fraction of a second before falling apart. That's how unstable it is. Lazar, though, he was talking about this stuff way back in the late 80s, claiming he saw a stable version of Element 115 being used at the S4 facility as the power source for a UFO. He said the material he saw was solid, stable, supposedly capable of bending gravity, fuel that would make an alien craft do all the impossible flight maneuvers people report. No wings, no sound, sudden sharp turns, instant acceleration, all that sort of stuff. Not every creepy secret facility tale needs an alien corpse or technology, though. The Stargate Project was a real US Army and intelligence agency program that started in 1977 and ran in various forms until the mid-90s. Its goal was to test whether people could use psychic abilities, specifically what they called remote viewing, the ability to see locations from far away in order to gather information. The program began as a response to rumors that the Soviets were doing research like this. Intelligence agencies were apparently worried about psychic spying. Participants were brought into classified facilities, rooms with no windows, under strict supervision from the military, and they'd have them try to prove their psychic abilities. Sense or describe things happening far away. I gotta imagine there was some blindfolding and guessing of cards involved. This isn't a conspiratorial government project, though. As silly as it sounds, this really did happen. Oak Ridge was built during the Manhattan Project. It's a huge section of land you'll never see unless you work there. The UFO rumors around Oak Ridge picked up right after Roswell in 1947. People in the area started reporting these odd lights in the sky, sometimes moving in ways that didn't match any kind of known aircraft. Security patrols picked up strange blips on their early warning radar, the kind that would show up for a moment and then vanish like nothing was ever there. Then there's the newer part of the story. In 2022, a chunk of metal taken from a UFO crash was sent to Oak Ridge to be studied. The official explanation was that it was magnesium alloy, but it was obviously really strange that this tiny piece of metal was being handled by a high-security nuclear facility instead of some college lab or any other lab. Oak Ridge doesn't just test random scrap. If something goes inside those fences, it's because someone figured it warranted being looked at behind locked doors by highly trained people. Unit 731 is one of those cases where the more you read about it, the more you really wish you hadn't. The Japanese military built it on the outskirts of Harbin, China. It was surrounded by fences, armed guards, and buildings that didn't look like military barracks, more like a mix of hospitals and factories. From the outside, it looked like some kind of industrial complex. Inside, it was basically the worst laboratory ever created. They brought in prisoners, Chinese civilians, Russian POWs, anyone considered expendable, and used them for some of the most horrific experiments imaginable. People were infected with plague and cholera just to see how fast the symptoms spread. Others were tied outside in the freezing cold so doctors could watch how long it took for frostbite to set in. There were surgeries without anesthesia, and entire buildings were dedicated to testing biological weapons. When Japan realized the war was ending, they tried to erase everything. Records were burned, prisoners were executed, buildings set on fire, but some documents survived, and a lot of soldiers eventually talked. That's how people found out just how massive this place was. A full military installation with thousands of staff carrying out these nightmarish experiments on human beings. And finally, we have the Soviet Poison Lab, which has one of those bland bureaucratic names, Laboratory 1, but what went on inside is anything but bland. It started in the early 20s under the Cheka, the first Soviet secret police. The whole purpose of the place was to figure out how to kill people in ways no one would be able to trace. The facility was deep inside government buildings in Moscow. Only a tiny group of officers even knew it existed. Test subjects were usually prisoners from the gulags or anyone else the state wanted to disappear. Poisons were slipped into tea, cigarettes, and medications, and the scientists took notes on how long it took for the victim to collapse or what symptoms would show up first. They tried everything, hoping to find something that would leave no chemical trace behind. The lab didn't disappear after the Soviet Union collapsed either. Former agents have said it just changed names and kept operating under the Federal Security Service. With all that said, I've been your host. I will catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next video.